Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I would like to thank the IDSA for inviting me in this very fruitful conference. This is my first time in India, and I hope I can give some insight for the conference in the topic of energy security. Yesterday, we have heard about the discussion about the miracle of Asia, both on its economic development and the potential conflict arose from that. One overlaying factor that I believe supporting this situation is energy demand, especially the energy resource. The development in Asia region cannot be separated from the availability of energy resource in the region. China cannot grow at more than 8% per year if they cannot access energy resource. Accordingly, the conflict in South China Sea cannot be separate from the probable energy resource in this sea. It's still probable, not yet proven. The only proven reserve is only in Natuna, which is the northern part of Indonesia, which is 200 trillion cubic feet. The other is still probable. So, energy demand in Asia region is derived from two factors: the economic development and the population. We have known that Asia is the second largest GDP in the world, and then most of the population in the world reside in this region. Unfortunately, only 8% of world surface, with 30% of them are land. Indonesia is a subject country which consists of many land, like Philippines and so on. For the simple analysis of the region, I categorize the region into 5. So, like in other part of the world, every time the economic growth or every time the population growth will be followed by increasing demand in energy. The same story will apply to Asia, except Japan. Japan is the most efficient country which use their energy because they have high dependency on imported oil and gas and coal. We have double our consumption from 1990 to 2012 based on BP Statistical Yearbook, which is predominantly came from fossil fuels, like even other part of the world. We can see that from the total energy, world energy consumption is located in Asian region. It's only North America and Europe will be followed. But if we look into more detail on the regional basis, we can see China, India, Japan, and South Korea are the biggest energy consumers. ASEAN, which consists of 10 countries, is similar with the total of India consume. Sorry, there's problem. But the primary energy in Asia is mostly fossil fuel, as I mentioned before, which is oil, natural gas, and coal. Why those fuel is dominant in Asia? Because Asia is blessed with this kind of hydrocarbon energy. But Asia also has some renewables, such as nuclear energy, hydroenergy, and other renewables such as biofuel, biomass, wind, and photovoltaic. I will analyze the energy security in Asia under the energy security measure framework, which consists of availability, accessibility, affordability, and acceptability. The availability will be more on the supply side of the energy sectors, including the domestic production and for access to import market. Accessibility is more on the infrastructure. So maybe there's a lot of potential hydrocarbon in Southeast Asia, but or in the South China Sea, but due to its location, it's very far from the mainland and so on, it creates some accessibility challenges. Next is affordability. It's related to price, which then derives to the cost of providing energy to the country. Lastly is acceptability, primarily on the environmental and social acceptability in utilizing energy in the region. On the availability, as I mentioned before, Asia is blessed with many hydrocarbon resources. For instance, the oil. The Asian region has the largest oil deposit compared to other regions in the world. We have 100,716 million kiloton oil equivalent. But if we go more detail on the sub-region, we can see the distribution of oil reserve is not evenly distributed. We can see that Western Asia, which is we know as Middle East, is the primary oil production region. Only small amount can be found in Southern Asia, including India, Sri Lanka, Southeastern, Eastern Asia, Northern Asia, and Central Asia. Similar story for natural gas. Asia has the biggest natural gas reserve in the world. But again, if we look into sub-regional level, we can see that still the Western Asia is the biggest producer. What about coal? The same story also. We are the largest coal reserve in the world, and only Northern America is the second. Again, at the regional level, we can see that only Northern Asia, which is predominantly China, and Southern Asia, which is India, is the primary coal reserve in the region. Before I talk about the accessibility, let's again look into the energy demand in Asia. From this figure, we can see that the demand center of energy demand in Asia located in Eastern Asia, which consists of China, Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea. But from the previous slide, we can see the resources is not in the eastern part. It is mostly in the western part, which is Middle East for the oil and gas, coal in the south and in the northern Asia. That's why the issue of accessibility in energy security is much more important, because this is how the supply region can be connected to the demand center. But I mean, availability of energy infrastructure is also crucial for transferring the supply. We have Asian pipeline networks starting from the Central Asia to China, from Myanmar to China, from Indonesia to Singapore, Natuna to Malaysia. Pipeline is good, but they have limited capacity, and sometimes they cross many country borders. One good example will be the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India gas pipeline, or TAPI gas pipeline across 4 countries. To overcome the limitation of pipeline network, the alternative will be the shipment through maritime access for oil, LNG, and LPG. You can see that most of the oil came from Middle East or Western Asia will be using oil tanker to East Asia, LNG to China and Japan, LPG to Indonesia. But again, this maritime access has also limitation. If we see that the differentiation between Western supply and Eastern demand is serviced through one and only one strait in the Southeast Asia, namely Malacca Strait. It's very narrow strait, and even without energy shipment through this strait, there is already a lot of other cargo for other products. This is one challenge of transporting energy using shipment. The other thing is availability of electricity transmission and distribution. This is very important. If before go to this in detail, I give you some figure that although Asia is the largest energy consumer in the world, but we still have low electrification ratio. Based on the available data, we only have 72% rural electrification. Means if we multiply with the total population of Asia, there is millions of people still has not been electrified. So the existence of electricity transmission and distribution is very important if we would like to improve the electrification ratio. The electricity trade between countries is already began. For example, in the Mekong area in Southeast Asia, or in Indonesia and Malaysia in northern Borneo, and maybe in the India also with the northern territory. Access to regional energy market is also important because not all countries in Asia region has domestic production. For example, Japan, Taiwan, Singapore has been energy importer for the long time. Special case for Singapore, Singapore, yes, they import a lot of crude oil, but they also export fuel oils, including to Indonesia. The challenge on accessibility is on the investment requirement. The development of TAPI, the development of Trans-Asian gas pipeline, Trans-Asia power grid is already hindered by lack of investment. The other thing that hinders the accessibility is individual country policy and regulation. Malaysia has been long known for limited their domestic production. So they will ask their national oil company, Petronas, to seek oil or gas in other countries, just to preserve their own domestic. So access to Malaysian oil and gas is very limited. Also, later on in the acceptability, I will discuss about the renewable energy and what is the challenge of accessing this kind of resource. The other important thing in energy security, which is a concern of every country in the world, not only Asia, even developed Northern America or Europe, have to deal with is energy price. High energy price maybe is not more important other than the volatility itself. Some countries can deal with high energy price, like Japan, like Singapore, Taiwan, and so on. But some developing countries in Asia is very vulnerable. Indonesia, Malaysia, Bangladesh, Thailand. Why? Because they implement what we call energy subsidy. As we know that the main consumption of oil is in the transportation sectors. The fluctuation, most of the subsidy will be given to the sectors. So, as the income level in each country will increase, usually is followed by increase in number of cars, which means the demand of oil, fuel oil, especially gasoline and diesel oil, is increasing. But that's not on oil or gas. Coal also. The increase in demand in India and in China has increased the average coal price in the region. While this is some advantage by coal exporter like Indonesia or Australia in this case, but not as in consumer countries. The problem of energy price is not stopped there. In economic sense, we always hear about the substitution effect. If the gasoline increase, then we go to natural gas or CNG in the case of transportation. But again, according to historical data, there is always positive correlation among fuel to the crude oil price. For example, the correlation between the oil price in average in OECD in the gas price, imported gas price by Germany. As you can see in the red dot, the correlation is positive. So every time the crude oil increase, then the natural gas increase. We can do the same analysis on crude oil and then with the coal price. And I suspect the same story will apply. So in the beginning most of the developing countries in the world, including in the Asia region, translate the affordability as to supply reliable energy service at affordable price, especially to increase the services to the poor, which they always translated into energy subsidy. The subsidy makes the price of energy in these countries is very low, below the market price. As the economic law dictate, low price will increase demand. So I suspect that many, the total energy demand in Asia, part of it is artificial because due to this subsidy. And as we can see in many literatures that this subsidy is not going to the poor. The subsidy to gasoline goes to the car owners. The car owners is usually the middle income population. But again, the affordability also deals with the increasing cost of exploring and exploiting new energy resources. Indonesia, for example, usually get their gas and oil from the western part. Very shallow sea, usually in the onshore, but currently they go to the eastern part, more remote, more isolated in deep sea area. This will increase the cost of production. If the country cannot develop their primary energy supply, then they will invite the foreign company. But that's not always the case. We have heard about the Venezuelan experience, about their energy sectors. Same thing can be happen in Asia. And the last thing about affordability is, as I mentioned before, most of the country is already dependent on foreign resources. China will depend on oil and gas. Indonesia has becoming net oil importer. We have been almost 20 years as OPEC members, but now we are net oil importers. Japan, Singapore, Taiwan is net importer. The direct consequences of this dependency is the exposure of international price, especially the volatility. The other dimension of energy security is acceptability. As I present in the first slide, that Asia region is still depend on hydrocarbon, the biggest source of greenhouse gas emission. We can see from most of Asian big cities like Beijing, Shanghai, New Delhi, Jakarta, there's a lot of pollution due burning fuel in transportation sector. So usually this is not accepted. Under the international agreement on greenhouse gas reduction, the fossil fuel will be limited. But who can prevent country who has abundant coal reserve like India, China, or Indonesia to use to energize their economic? The latest news is even EU, the tightest region in the world that implement low emission of greenhouse gas emission has been little bit changed their target. It means that we can still rely on fossil fuel. What about renewables? Renewables is always seen as a sustainable, clean energy resources. But from acceptability point of view, it's not always that. For example, large hydro. Large hydro in Indonesia has been stopped because on displacement issues. We have heard about the Three Gorges Dam in China, also the same story. Biofuel, especially from transportation, the issue will be on food versus energy. Will be the biofuel will be developed in the existing farmland or not? That is the question. Geothermal. This is very abundant in Philippines and Indonesia. This is near the ring of fire in Pacific. But some of the geothermal reserves are located in protected forests. 60 to 70% of 27 gigawatts of Indonesian geothermal potential located in protected forests. The question, shall we continue to develop geothermal in Indonesia, considering that if we open these protected forests, then the value of the environmental value will be decreasing. Nuclear. As we know, some Eastern Asia, China, Japan, Taiwan, and South Asia countries like India, Pakistan already developed the nuclear power plant. But from my point of view, if you want to develop more nuclear power plants in Asia region, especially in East and Southeast Asia, there will be some governance issues. Although the nuclear power plant is for public interest, but usually the discussion has been done behind the closing door without public has access on the information. This is what happened especially in Southeast Asia. Our joint research in IIE and Nautilus Institute on the nuclear purification of East and Southeast Asia found that not only the governance issue, but the problem of spent fuel. China already problem on spent fuel. Japan already fuel their spent fuel location. Taiwan, Indonesia, they say Indonesia government we put in the sea. What sea? Southeast China Sea, Java Sea, Indian Ocean, because Indonesia, like the countries along the Ring of Fire, is vulnerable to earthquake. Also, nuclear purification of Asia, especially in Southeast Asia, which means Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, will create a new dependency, especially on uranium. The closest uranium supplier in the region will be Australia. Indonesia and Australia has been had very dynamic relationship. Indonesia want to put the nuclear power plant in eastern part of Java Island, and there is objection from the Australian government. Then we move the nuclear power plant to near certain tip of Sumatra. Then our neighbor, Singapore and Malaysia, say no. Because why? there is some risk in developing nuclear power plant. One reason why the already built nuclear power plant in Philippines has not been operated since the completion is on the governance issue. The power plant was built during Marcos era. And during that era, it is suspected that many corruption involved in the development of this nuclear power plant. So after the last payment by the government, which is, I think, 2 years ago, then this new power plant will be closed. Because just afraid, maybe because the corruption will use less and less material, less and less standardized structure. So even in emergency situation, this power plant will be meltdown. The last thing about the acceptability is cultural acceptance. Maybe this is not very important in some countries, but in some countries it's very important. For example, the biomass from animal in South Asia, like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, is a common source of energy, but not as common in southeastern region. In Indonesia, there's also a problem on the cultural. For example, in eastern part, which is Papua, the government there tried to develop, to increase the access to electricity by building more and more micro hydro. Technically, financially, it's feasible. But once the plant is built, then the problem will be where? Because the whole Papua owned by the people of Papua. Means different with the other part of Indonesia. In other part of Indonesia, the government has legalized or has some judicial on who owns the land, but not in Papua. This is some example of cultural acceptance. From the 4A, the availability, accessibility, the affordability, and the acceptability, you can see that in the near future, even in the long term, Asia will have challenges in their energy security. Dependency on imported energy. What about the developing countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, that have to face with the volatility of international energy price? One sure is their development will be hindered. There's only a few suggestions that I will share with you on improving energy security in Asia region. First, reforming domestic energy policy, especially market imperfection. The cost to implement energy subsidy is very huge. Most of the country cannot afford, but only for political reason, they still implement energy subsidy. Technology research and development. Biofuel, for example. The food and energy challenge can be answered through the development of third generation biofuel, which use the algae-based resource, not the food-based resource. Lastly, is increasing regional cooperation. It is not accidentally I put cooperation the last point, because as we heard from yesterday discussion, there is a lot about cooperation, but the implementation is very challenging. We have in the region, we have ASEAN, we have SARC, the South Asian Regional Cooperation, we have the CAREC, which is the Central Asia, APEC, and so on. You can see from this cooperation is not fully cooperate. ASEAN, even between members, still a conflict. In SARC, you know, between the dynamic relationship with India and Pakistan, CAREC, and so on. But we have planned in the future. The Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India gas pipeline. It's very good, as long as we can settle all the differences with the country involved in this gas pipeline. Trans-Asia gas pipeline, very good. But the question is where the gas will come from. Indonesia, if they depend on Indonesia, then just forget it. Why? For the next 10 years, Indonesia will increase their consumption on energy, on natural gas as a replacement to the declining production of oil. Trans-Asian power grid, good on the paper, but most recently is most based on bilateral agreement. A lot of standard and code should be in place before this kind of cooperation can be take place. With this, I end my presentation. Thank you.